All right, wonderful.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. This is Valerie Sayer, and we have Kent Sayer here. We're going to be talking about brain myths, facts, and strategies, and then have a Q&A after. Really glad that you joined us. We have a website, nutritionconnectionbalance.com. We have our phone number there. And again, if you want the recording and you're not on our email list, then please email ncbteam@nutritionconnectionbalance.com, and Kent will also put that in the chat box. All right. Terrific. Okay, so I have to say it's okay. And we will just talk a little bit. So I'm going to introduce Kent today. Kent is my stepson, and he is a certified nutrition coach and multiple other things. He has been part of Nutrition Connection Balance for 3 years now and has a master's degree and was also a personal trainer at Florida State in his undergraduate degree. And he's super passionate about finding how to really help people balance through a lot of biochemical factors that are individualized in our body. And I think the most fun thing about Kent is that he's kind of like me in the way of he wants to figure it out. And so, when you have that quest to figure things out, it makes it really fun, but it also means that person that's looking at your results is going to a whole nother level to try to make sure we discover what your body needs, not just what the literature says or what we've seen clinically, but what your body needs. So I've really appreciated working with Kent. And of course, when you work with someone younger, their technology skills and their thinking is sometimes really helpful to get other perspectives or other things you might miss. So I'm really glad you're part of NCB, Kent, and he is ahead of all the testing outside of the hormones and the adrenals. I used to run a compounding pharmacy, and I still do all of those. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, Kent?
And as many of you know, this is Valerie Sayer to my right or left, whichever way you're facing. She is a registered and licensed dietitian. She is the founder and head of Nutrition Connection Balance since 2005. And she is an expert in all things functional health testing, especially hormones and bone density.
Yeah, thank you, Kent. So we're really passionate about what we do, and it's really great that you're here tonight. So hopefully you will learn a lot. Just so you know, also we're gonna be doing this speech in Ohio live, and it will be double long. So this is just touching on some things, but we're gonna have a lot of other strategies live this summer in July in Ohio. So if you're interested or live near Ohio, please let us know. So let's talk a little bit about some brain facts that are important, because if you don't know why they're important, it's really hard to be motivated to do anything about it. So first of all, you may not know what dementia is. So dementia is a progressive syndrome characterized by a decline in cognitive functioning that is severe enough to interfere with daily life and independence. And it's interesting, right? Because we certainly don't want to be diagnosed and then you already can't do things. A loss of independence is a pretty big deal. We know that there's multiple causes of dementia and a variety of diseases or injuries that are the primary or the secondary effect on the brain. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide a little bit more because it was very surprising. Kent and I attended, was it last month or 2 months ago already? In Dallas, we attended an advanced brain conference, and it was really intense because we found out that Alzheimer's really accounts for 60 to 80% of all dementia cases. 1 in 9 people that have Alzheimer's after 65. I mean, 1 in 9. I mean, my own husband's 64. That's not good, right? 175,000 cases have an onset of dementia before the age of 65. Women are part of 2/3 of all the cases of dementia in the United States. So we have a higher susceptibility, and we'll talk about why. It's the number one cause of disability. And by 2050, the causes of dementia will double. It's 350 billion is spent on dementia sick care. And I know lots of people that are taking care of young people as well as parents, some two parents. I have one patient that was taking care of four family members with dementia. It is just heart-wrenching. And you can imagine what it was doing to her and her family, taking care of everybody and trying to make all those arrangements in and out of the home. It's special cases. What you want to understand and why we're talking about this is not to have doom and gloom. It's to understand what is the best strategy to reduce your risk before a diagnosis and identify your personal risk factors. So just so you know, that is why we're talking about it. But you still have to know really that there's a big chance of this and what we can do about it. So there's a lot of different contributing factors, and people have it wrong of what they think are the contributing factors. I'm always amazed with my background how everyone thinks everything's genetic. Only 3% of almost any condition is genetic, just so you know. And even if there is a genetic condition, unless you're congenital or born with it, then that still means it doesn't have to be expressed or turned on. What we do know is that there are initial triggers that directly affect your risk of developing dementia. Number one is actually endotoxins. That was very surprising. You know, you would think it would be right genetics, or you think it would be poor diet, or you might think it would be something else, but it's actually endotoxins. And Kent's going to talk a little bit more about what that means. The second was any kind of brain trauma, which of course we know from concussions to different things, surgeries can absolutely affect the brain, of course, because you're actually going into the brain. So that kind of makes more sense. And obviously, you want to avoid brain surgery and injuries to the brain if you can. But, you know, if there's a car accident, if you've been a professional athlete, you may, and especially we didn't know the things we do now about brain injuries. This one might surprise you, though, as then we get into insulin resistance. 93% of every American, even if you're thin, has insulin resistance. That means that your body is resistant even when your pancreas is producing enough insulin. It is also the number one contributing factor for heart disease. It is not high cholesterol. So it's very important to understand how important it is. And when we do testing, 90% of doctors will not test your insulin, even if you ask. They refuse. And part of that is because they don't know what to do about it. They don't just give you a medication. So we've got to be testing this. We can do it by a finger stick. We'll talk about that more later, but it's that important. So if you are over 50 or over 30 and already having a higher risk or worried about these things or any kind of cognitive decline, you need your insulin tested. Okay. Hormone decline. So hormone changes also definitely increase all of the risks of dementia. And I cannot tell you that what's so beautiful about the last year, or there are multiple books. I was just talking to one of the gynecologists I've known since my compounding days, 30 years. I've known her 25 years. And we were talking about how we've always tested hormones, we've always tested adrenals, and we've always given bioidentical hormones or herbs if needed. And when the World Health Initiative came out, there was a concern that synthetic hormones increase breast cancer. All of that was wrong. And that's where I'll be doing a hormone lecture this summer so that we up our game and make sure people are up to date on that. So even in a lot of cases, when you have cancer, you can make sure you can balance your hormones through herbs, through diet, and through bioidentical hormones. So it is a misnomer that you cannot, okay? The third is actually chronic inflammation. And I know if you guys have seen us talk before, inflammation is part of all disease when it's systemic inflammation. That doesn't mean you have a knee injury and your knee hurt. That means in your arteries, in your arterial wall, in your tissues, there's inflammation. And when it's chronic, that means over and over, then it increases your risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. And that needs to also be measured by a special blood test called highly sensitive CRP. Mitochondrial dysfunction and circulation. So when there's circulation issues, and also when there's medications that change mitochondrial dysfunction. If you don't know what mitochondrial is, mitochondria are in every cell and they're the powerhouse of what gets energy into all of our cells, especially our brain and our heart. And as we age, it naturally gets harder to get that in, but certain medications like statin medications absolutely decrease mitochondrial dysfunction. And every other person in the United States, even if they have a little bit of high cholesterol, is just automatically put on a statin. So you've got to be a proponent for yourself so that you're not increasing your risk of diseases. The gut brain, when we look at, again, the intestines and our digestive tract produces all these mental health markers or neurotransmitters, and they are what make us feel good. When we talk about depression, anxiety, panic attacks, cognitive functioning, we're always thinking it's in the brain, but about 80 to 90% of them are made in the gut. And good enough nutrition is not the only thing that works. When you've been on chronic antibiotics, chronic medications, had chronic digestive issues, whether it's a condition randomly or something like Crohn's disease, you're going to have a higher risk of dementia if you don't balance them properly. Chronic infections, that includes COVID. And a lot of people do know that there's been a difference with COVID with their cognitive functioning. We call it COVID brain. People have all these different things, but it's an actual true. Any kind of chronic infection can decrease your risk of cognitive functioning. And because all these other things we talked about change, your digestive change, your mitochondrial function changes, your hormones change, inflammation goes up. So it's really important to address these properly. So the first step of dementia is initial triggers. And in that gut brain also comes diet. Have to have more whole food. What we're showing is that more and more plaque and neural inflammation is caused by processed foods. So you've got to have less processed foods also and have more whole foods and foods that are healthy and tested. So the initial triggers are first. The next thing that happens is there's an amyloid production, and then it breaks down the blood-brain barrier that gets into the brain. You want to be knowing genetically and what things affect the brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's called BDNF. You'll usually hear it, abbreviated, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the final stage, when again, there's already some major damage, is that the neuron and synapse degeneration and damage happens. That's where, again, the key to the lock can't open it. And there's not, it's sort of like the old days. If you pulled out a plug, it would fray, or spark. We don't have those things now because plugs are so much better. But that's kind of what happens with the brain. They fray. And there's damage with that chronic inflammation and high insulin and viruses and certain medications. So it's really important under their stages. The other really important thing before we go on to the next slide, and this is the hardest slide, I promise, the whole time, is that we know once you have it, we don't have any cases of reversed Alzheimer's. You can slow it down and you can have some better responses, but once you get it, we do not have a way to reverse it yet. So do you understand why it's so important to know what those triggers are, to be measuring them, and then to be addressing them? That, of course, Kent and I are going to help you with. So the first thing is you want to test and assess. So number one, at our office, we have an aging renew genetic test. It's just a cheek swab, super easy, do in your home. You send off to the lab, about 4 weeks. It takes a little while to process, but it actually tests APOE and BDNF. They are two of the most important genetic markers. You don't use that to say, I'm going to get Alzheimer's. You use that so you know if you have a mild, medium, or high risk. And then depending where your risk is, you really want to make sure you're addressing all the things we talked about on the first page. The second is you want to test your insulin and hemoglobin A1C. At our office, we have a CMP, an in-home test. You just prick your finger. We also, our website has been redone. Anyone can go there and order any test and any supplement we talk about today. Any. So you don't have to worry about dates. You don't have to do anything else. All of it's very self-explanatory on nutritionconnectionbalance.com. You want to make sure the systemic inflammation is controlled. How you do that is you measure your highly sensitive CRP, also a finger stick, and the omega. The omega testing, that shouldn't say clinic, it should say testing. And that's also a finger stick test, okay? Then there's toxins. Remember, endotoxins were number one. That is metals, toxic metals. That is, even there when we talk about it, people just think no one has metals. I was part of a lead poisoning program at a pediatric center in Cleveland. You cannot believe how many people have metals today when Kent and I test. And it comes from essential oils. It comes from supplements that aren't tested. Even when people tell me they went to Whole Foods, it doesn't matter. Anywhere from 70 to 90% are contaminated with metals, bacteria, all these different things. You want to make sure if you're in an environment that's toxic, been around a fire, been around mold, old buildings, you've got to test your environmental toxins. Those can be in lotions and potions. Those are in all sorts of things. Mycotoxins, when you use a lot of antibiotics, when you're in moldy environments. Also, when we are finding out people that drink coffee, a lot of the mycotoxins and mold are showing up in coffee now. So you can see why I've never been a coffee fan. And then number one, in my opinion, that is the most important is glyphosate. Glyphosate, we know forwards and backwards that there's a high propensity for lymphoma and cancers. And it's a really good place to start if you're on a budget to make sure that, again, you know what you can do. All those are a simple 1 a.m. urine test, okay? Remember, circulation's the next one. There's an advanced doctor's data or cardiometabolic profile. If you do something like that, it shows the lipid sizes, but it has the hemoglobin A1C, the insulin, the highly sensitive CRP. You don't have to do the finger stick. That does require, though, a phlebotomist to come to your house or work, and we get that set up for you. And then hormone decline and make sure it's in balance. So when we're talking about hormones, we're not just talking about estrogen or testosterone. We're talking about your adrenals and especially your DHEA. DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, is one of the most important things for the aging brain. And I can't tell you how many people I test that are medically low. And again, medically low at age 50, they do nothing about it. They test when they're 70. And again, it may be too late. You've got to be looking at these things now. And even as a young person, get a screening of it. It's a saliva test. And when you get that screening, you have a baseline. So if something changes when you're 40 or 50, you're in that preventative zone to do something about it, not waiting until it's completely depleted. And then, of course, the mental health neurotransmitters is extremely important because it looks at 26 different brain markers that directly affect the GI tract. Okay. So when we talk about that, then just kind of the third part that's helpful is that when we talk about lifestyle, that number one, you want to have vigorous exercise. They show over and over, slide after slide, of how vigorous exercise, small bouts, 30 seconds to even 1 minute, can help circulation get to the brain. What they call, and they're calling this a lot now, are exercise snacks. So I've started to incorporate this. All of you that know me know I exercise every day, and I exercise anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours every single day, always. But if you don't know me, I also sit a lot because I'm a clinician. And since I've gotten older, it's much harder with circulatory issues and, of course, so on. And these exercise snacks just mean that instead of working a 12-hour day, when I have a break or I have even a patient for 2 hours, I get up and I do 1 minute of squats. 1 minute, that's it. Or 100 squats in a row, and just set your timer. Or go up and down steps, walk around your building for 1 minute, and then go back to work. So what we are learning is that how much exercise and high intense exercise in small bits affect circulation and the brain. So you only have to do a little bit, but you can do them every day. Okay. You could get on an exercise bike. You could do step ups. So all sorts of things. Lifestyle stressors, sugar, carbs. And when I say carbs, all of them. The older you are, the less carbs you need and the more lean protein you need. That includes a vegan and vegetarian. I always say my vegans and vegetarian have the best weight. They have the lowest cholesterol and the lowest cancer, and they have the highest aches and pains and the highest mental illness because they don't have enough protein. And those protein affects muscle, nerve, conduction, every one of those 26 neurotransmitters that signal your brain, and you've got to have less. You absolutely want less juices and soda and things like lattes. When we were talking about the amount of sugar, it directly affects the amyloid and white matter in your brain. And then you certainly want to manage your stress and your cortisol levels. When we're talking cortisol levels and we measure them by saliva and urine, we're not talking about having just a good or bad day, or if you're thin or you're heavy. When you can wear a glucose monitor, you could be in having a conversation or doing a speech. Say, I feel calm, I'm excited, but maybe my glucose monitor would go up and my cortisol goes up. We have to have our glucose like this. We do not want these spikes. They contribute to how our brain works long term. You want to have optimal circadian cycles. That means that you want daily light and you want to go to sleep early and you want to get up early. And when we do any kind of hormone testing and we check all the melatonin levels that are 4, I always go over the circadian circle. And every few hours, each part of the day, different organs are changed by your sleep. So if you go to bed early and you get up early, your body can detox properly, you're not eating, insulin has a better chance of not being high, and I can go on and on and on. Remember, even when you're thin, 93% of Americans are insulin resistant. That's a major problem. So we know why people are unhealthy. With nutrition, you want to avoid the fake processed fats. You want to look on the nutrition facts label, but you need to look in the ingredients for palmitic fat, fractionated, and hydrogenated oil. And avoid as much processed foods as you can. We're all going to eat some processed foods, but when you have like a powder or like, let's say a Juice Plus powder, we know it's tested for over 200 contaminants. We know it's whole food. It has a nutrition facts label, and we want more lean protein. Absolutely, after the age of 50, you want 1 gram of protein per pound or more, especially for lean mass. So if I have 150 pounds of lean mass, I need 150 grams of protein. The average woman has 40 to 60. Remember, women have 2/3 more Alzheimer's and dementia than men. That is one of the reasons, besides hormonal changes, in my opinion. And then we must have long-term optimal, should be from birth, essential fatty acids. Those are omegas, and they're called essential because our body does not make them, and they directly affect the brain and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and we're going to talk about that. Vitamin D3 and phytonutrients, especially Juice Plus. When we went to this brain lecture, they went over those things over and over and over and over, and medical study after medical study. And a lot of these people were stunned. I've been saying the same thing for 30 years. You can't do it, though, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or do it for a year or not do it for a year. You have to do it every day for your whole life. Okay? All right, so I got you pumped up, right? So you know what the main causes are, you know why it's important, you know what testing to do and what markers, and then you know what lifestyle things you could start doing if you need to start there, or hopefully incorporate some of both of these. All right, Kent, you're up.
So, one of the things Valerie mentioned was how exercise boosts brain function. So, research continuously shows vigorous exercise improves executive function, cognitive performance, working memory, inhibitory control, serotonin, and norepinephrine. So, right next to all of these, I've written an example. So, executive function, if you're planning a work project and you have to make an adjustment when some problems happen. Cognitive performance, if you're reading a report and you have to make a smart decision based on what you understood. Working memory, remembering a task after a meeting without needing to check your notes. Inhibitory control, resisting the urge to snap at someone after a stressful day. Serotonin, we know, is associated with a short-term boost in mood. And norepinephrine after exercise, a short-term boost in alertness. So, in addition to all of these things, I have a little bonus written at the bottom here. Vigorous exercise improves hippocampus volume, which hippocampus is in charge of your memory. Super important with cognitive decline and especially memory issues as we get older. Exercise has a neuroprotective effect on the brain. It can increase antioxidant production because our brain uses lactate that is produced during exercise and then can use the glucose in creating more antioxidants. And exercise also improves insulin signaling. So that relates back to some of the insulin resistance issues that Valerie mentioned before. So all of that, great, super cool, but it's not really that relevant unless you know what to do about it. So Valerie, you can go to the next slide for me. Here are 3 easy ways to get a brain boost for your exercise. So most importantly, written at the top, vigorous exercise. It has to be greater than 75% of your maximum heart rate. Easy way to find your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. So I've ordered these 1, 2, and 3 from longest to shortest. And a big note at the bottom, these options are not replacements for a full balanced fitness routine. Just want to make that clear. Option number 1, 30 to 40 minutes of HIIT exercise, that's interval training. So that means 1 to 3 minutes of high bursts of high intensity with a short recovery in between. In addition to this, you want to make sure that you include strength training at another point throughout the week. An example of this, if you do circuit training with weights, you could do running where you run for a minute and then walk for 2 minutes, rowing, cycling, elliptical, Stairmaster, swimming. There's plenty of exercise classes like this. Like my girlfriend, she does Orange Theory, and that serves this purpose perfectly. Option number 2 is a 6-minute workout. So you could do 6 rounds of 40 seconds maximum intensity, 20 seconds of rest. Now, 6 minutes of working out a day isn't going to be like a full balanced exercise routine, but it is going to give you a noticeable brain boost in the hours after you do this. And then the shortest option, something that Valerie touched on briefly, is the exercise snacks. So these could be 60 to 120 seconds of maximum intensity done multiple times throughout the day. So Valerie mentioned you've been sitting a while, you have an important meeting come up, you want to be locked in and completely focused and alert. You could get up and do 60 seconds of as many squats as you can. And what you'll find after that is yes, you'll be out of breath, but you'll also be more alert. You'll get a boost in some of those neurotransmitters right after the exercise. So these are three great options. They're better than nothing. They're focused specifically on the brain, but at some point throughout the week, you want to make sure that you also are doing strength training and more longer duration cardiovascular training for your heart and for your circulation.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Kent said, part of that reason, again, is how it affects the insulin. And again, the more muscle you have, the better your muscles and your whole tissues take up glucose in the bloodstream. And of course, the other thing is if let's say you're not very fit or you don't know if you can do that. So a lot of people just walk. So maybe during your walk, make sure you put your phone away and have a friend or yourself do some lunges or do a fast walk or walk backwards. You don't have to run if you can't. But if you do that, even after a few weeks, like when I work with people sometimes as a medical exercise specialist that are very ill, the doctors say you got to get on exercise bike 30 minutes. They can't even get on the bike. I said, your first goal is to be able to get in off the bike. The second goal is you get on there for 10 seconds, 3 times a day. Within 2 weeks, they're on it for 2 minutes, 3 times a day. In 5 weeks, they're riding the bike for 10 minutes. They can't believe it. So always, if you have to work your way up, that's okay too, because it's so important, as Kent said, for your brain. And it helps right away with these shorter versions or high intensity to get your memory and your brain working right away. We did this during the conference, and it was interesting because, health professionals don't exercise a lot. There were people like, oh my God, 1 minute, that's all she did. 1 minute where we did squats, whether you did them light, whether you did them all the way down, or you did them on a chair. And people were roused. It was really interesting to see. So it's a really fun thing to do in a group because you kind of don't believe it. But it's amazing how it shifts your brain to a whole nother level and how you feel. You feel exhilarated. So absolutely give this a try. It's so doable and it's free. All right. Great. All right, so we talked a little bit about other things that are important. These are examples of some of the things that they showed, and I even put some studies on here because I know if you've seen me talk, I talk about vitamin D all the time. And for some reason, doctors and other people will still say D doesn't matter. It's not true. I have said for 30 years, it is something every adult, infant, and child needs to measure, remeasure until they get it right, and then every year. So low vitamin D affects brain cognitive impact. Lower D, we want to make sure no matter what, I want a male and female between 50 and 100 or any age, a 2-year-old, a 93-year-old. And ideal, which means optimal, where there's a less and less risk of not just cognitive, but other things like bone density, like other hormone imbalances, are 65 to 100 for a man and 75 to 100 for a woman. It's considered deficient when you're under 30. Some labs will say 20. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely, you'll have rickets, you will have osteoporosis, you'll have all sorts of problems. So you've got to get your vitamin D up. Vitamin D is very cheap and easy. I had just done a call for a big group, and unfortunately, I can't recommend a brand other than my office. I used to be able to recommend some brands, and they have found lead in them. They found other things, even in really good stores. So I can't do that anymore. Vitamin D is not expensive. Order them from our office. There's a liquid or there's capsules. We show when the D is low, you have poor cognitive functioning and higher risk of Alzheimer's. Look at this study, Neurology 2012. This is 2025. We've known this forever, but if you ask a doctor, what can I do to prevent Alzheimer's? They'll say nothing. Seriously. You have a 79 higher risk of dementia and higher levels of less brain damage if your D, that should be 2 sentences there. So you have a 79% higher risk of dementia with low vitamin D. And if you have a higher level of D in that 65 to 175 for women, there's less brain damage in the white matter. They can actually look at an MRI in your brain. This is a really great one, a new study in 2022, for every 10 nanomoles. So let's say your vitamin D is super low and it's 30. Even if it goes to 40, they show that's still way too low, right? You're hearing where I want you. They show white matter starts to change. In one of the studies with people that already had Alzheimer's, when they were given 400 IUs, which will not give you any of these levels. Nobody, I've never seen anyone even be at 50 at 400 other than an infant. They still showed changes subjectively when they did different scores in nursing home and assisted living for Alzheimer's. So I can't tell you how important vitamin D is. Okay. It also reduces oxidative stress in seniors and improves telomere health. If you don't know what telomeres are, we don't have time to talk about this, but this is in an Alzheimer's journal, and I've tested telomeres for years at our office. It shows you what type of damage is happening in your genes. And the shorter the tail on your telomere, the closer you are to bad things happening. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how old you are. So it's super important. So again, vitamin D is so important. If you don't know what white matter in the brain is, it's crucial for connecting and transmitting brain signals that are important for learning, memory, and problem solving. And then, of course, we want a healthy brain. Okay. So vitamin D is pretty darn important. All right, Kent, you're up.
In addition to the vitamin D, omega-3s is another thing that we test very often. And the research is pretty profound on how omega-3s being in the optimal range improves brain health and brain function. So, ideal omega-3 levels reduce systemic inflammation, and inflammation is the starting point for most, if not all, disease. So, if we can get your omega-3s into the ideal range, we can reduce your disease risk, which is what everybody wants. Specifically to the brain, though, right here I've listed 8 different studies, and this is all just for the brain. So, an omega index above 8% reduced Alzheimer's risk by 49%, and 8% is a bare minimum. We want the omega index between 10 and 12%. An ideal omega range reduced all-cause dementia and cognitive decline by about 20%. An ideal omega range slowed the onset of cognitive decline by 5 years. It resulted in better learning, memory, and emotional connection to memory because it increases that molecule BDNF that Valerie mentioned, which affects the brain's plasticity and ability to grow and adapt. Ideal omega ranges increased brain volume and hippocampus volume, which affects your memory. EPA and DHA, which are the 2 main forms of omega-3s that we want to focus on, improve cognitive function in people with Alzheimer's and depression. Having too low of an omega index during pregnancy increases the risk of postpartum depression. And on that note, super important, especially if you're pregnant or if you have a kid, an ideal omega intake during pregnancy helps the child. It's associated with a better IQ, better mental development, and a third lower risk of asthma and respiratory infections. So this isn't just relevant for you and for me, it's also relevant for your kid or for if you're pregnant.
Yeah, so pretty important, that's for sure. I was in an exercise and pregnancy study, and they showed all the way back then with Dr. James Clapp, a 25-year study, that exercise made the child smarter, they were healthier, they were bigger than their parents as far as height, all to be true in my children. So it's fascinating how even exercise, again, because we know of how it affects the circulation in the brain, and now we understand all these other mechanisms, it's pretty exciting. Back then, we didn't know why. We just knew it was good for the baby and the pregnant mom. So,
Another thing that Valerie mentioned at the beginning was the importance of nutrition. So, poor nutrition habits increase the risk of cognitive impairment. This is really important because having a higher daily intake of fruits and vegetables is linked to stronger antioxidant defenses, better cognitive performance, and a lower risk of cognitive decline. The challenge with this, as many people know, is that most people don't get enough fruits and vegetables to reap these benefits. Or if they do, it's not very consistently. So this makes the Juice Plus a no-brainer. Pun intended. I was pretty proud of that one. Juice Plus, a no-brainer. Valerie has recommended it for many years. I've been on it myself for more than 10 years. It's fruit, vegetable, and berry powders in a capsule, or now they have a superfood powder that you pour into a drink. More than 30 different fruits, vegetables, and berries. You get the essential phytonutrients missing from most people's diets. It's backed by more than 40 peer-reviewed studies showing support for 13 areas of health, including cognitive function, improvements in memory, attention, and processing speed. It's easy to do, capsules. You can be consistent even when you're busy. And that's the biggest thing. I'll cook vegetables as often as I can if I'm traveling or if I'm just really busy. Sometimes I just don't. And then I know that I have this to fall back on. So it's definitely better than doing nothing. It's designed to complement and not replace a healthy diet. So this is a great starting point. And then in addition to this, getting your fruit and vegetable intake up is really crucial for your brain.
Yeah. And the average is one per day. And we're supposed to have 10 to 17. And then we have to have more if we're stressed or older. So it's just not going to happen. And the superfoods is really terrific. If you don't like capsules or you don't want to swallow them or you don't want to open them, the superfoods like you see here is just a stick of powder you add in water. Can't make it any easier, whether you're travel, whether you're busy, whether you're not. And I always try to teach people, add a fruit or vegetable in every meal, every snack with lean protein, or a good lean protein and fat. So you could have a clementine orange and 2 to 4 tablespoons of, raw almonds as an example. Okay, so it's really, really important, again, for cognitive functioning. So Luminate is something else that has key ingredients for the brain. So we talked a little bit about there's a lot of different things out there, but part of why I like the Luminate is that it has all the ingredients that I've used for years, but actually in a powder stick again, something super simple that you can add to water or hot water and replace your coffee habit or your tea habit. And it has a lot of other benefits. It is really got 3 different categories. It's got a coffee berry, not the actual bean, the berry. It's got 80 milligrams of caffeine from the berry. Most people that are caffeine sensitive, I had 2 cups of coffee my entire life. That's it, ever. And both was a disaster. I would never do it again. And so I won't even go into why, but not good for me. And so the first time I tried it, my husband was a little worried and I didn't notice anything. So it was great. I had no jitteriness, nothing. So because it's from the berry. We know that caffeine, when it's in the right form and clean, can increase alertness, focus, clarity, and performance. Then it's got nootropins. Nootropins are known for helping the brain with neurodegeneration, as well as those adrenals. Remember I said hormones? Adrenals are the stress hormones like cortisol and DHEA, and they help with those pathways. So that they show helps with neurodegeneration, which prevents the breakdown in the brain. We know that Alpinia ganglia is another type of herb or nootropin that's in the ginger and turmeric family that helps with alertness and your ability to respond to anything. Like Kent said, if there's stress, you're trying to learn something new, or you've got to respond to a problem and figure out how to figure out that task. And then ashwagandha is another adaptogenic herb that helps with stress, coping, cortisol levels, mental, and is considered a youthful hormone because of what they've seen with telomeres. So again, interesting. So what's so nice is when I've used these ingredients in the office previously, you might have to take 8 different bottles of things. Now it's one little stick that tastes really good that you can just add in 6 to 8 ounces of water, hot or cold. I just add it to my water bottle and I add my superfoods, and that's what I do when I work out. I don't have energy problems, but I do those for that reason. And so it's really helped with my performance. So it just gives you another option and an example of some things to do. Because what people are doing, they're going on the internet and they're getting mushroom coffees and all these other things. They're not tested. You want to make sure anything you buy, anything you get from our office, either has an NSF certification, which means it's tested for over 200 contaminants, or it's made in an NSF facility. And those we private label. We ensure that it's been tested so you're not getting metals or endotoxins, since that is the #1 cause of cognitive degeneration. So you want to take action, personalize, and be responsible for your health. Try to test and optimize. Evaluate your own lifestyle. Think about what we talked about. What could you improve upon? Is it going to bed earlier? Is it getting up earlier? Is it your nutrition? Is it your exercise? You can start small, even with the exercise snacks. Do you have the right foundational supplements based on research? And again, looking at those things. Everything we've talked about is available on nutritionconnectionbalance.com website now, and it's super user friendly. And we also have education blogs, YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and we are spending a lot of time doing multiple levels of education for people there. So you can get a lot of free information. We're going to be doing this. The last one we did in the beginning of the year were different myths, and we'll do our next one will be Heart Smart, and that will be September 9th. And we will also add a different, besides the QR code, because we know some people had trouble. We'll make sure there's multiple ways that you can register and get on that. So put that on your calendar. And then let's go ahead and stop the share. And does anyone have any questions? Or if there's questions, Kent, maybe you can pull them up and we can see what we can help people with today. What about sunshine for vitamin D? Good question. Okay, so you can order vitamin D right on nutritionconnectionbalance.com. You can go right to shop and there'll be tests and then there will be supplements. So super easy. And then what about sunshine and vitamin D? And that's from Jill. Great question. In my longer presentation, and you can go back to my aging presentation that's on our YouTube channel, I talk about D and all the different things. When they looked at Hawaiian surfers, 2/3 still had medically deficient vitamin D. You cannot get enough from the sun. I remember when a very close friend of mine, I was living in Ohio at the time. She's lived in Florida her whole life, was a boat, worked for cardiologists, super tan, and she developed a really rare autoimmune disease. And it's not a good one. It's very dangerous and it's very rare. And I flew down there to help take care of her. And her doctor, her rheumatologist, would not test her D. I brought in the research. He goes, she's not going to be low. Tested her and she was at 7. She super tan, owns a boat, lived in Florida her whole life. And he apologized. And she had a complete reversal. She is doing well, and she has never had a flare up since, after about 6 months of getting her D up, getting her essential fatty acids up. And I flew down there many weekends to help take care of her, to just make sure she got everything she needed. So you cannot get enough from the sun. You can help, but how we metabolize it and all these things are a problem why that doesn't happen anymore, unfortunately. The light is for your eyes and for your brain and for your happiness. It isn't to get your vitamin D level up. Okay. And sometimes if you have someone in extremes, like I had an Olympic swimmer once, she swam in and outdoors. That's the only one I ever had to adjust her D, because she would go up 20, 30 points, depending on if she was swimming, 3-4 months outside or indoors. But that's really rare. We're talking about extremes. Okay. If you've been diagnosed with a brain degenerative disease, what alternate things can you do other than prescriptions? Number one is test your mental health markers. Kent, I know that we both had patients with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And I will tell you that, again, when we look at the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, they're always skewed. I mean, crazy numbers. And if they're on medications, they're 100 times worse. So I recommend the mental health testing, the omega testing, the vitamin D testing is absolutely number one first. And then they see, like I said, even with end-stage Alzheimer's, even 400 IUs of D, they showed some changes. They weren't better, but even there, they could measure changes in a nursing home. That's incredible, in assisted living centers. Anything else to say there, Kent? Did I miss anything?
Just like to expand on that, I would say the first thing to do would be to test those tests that you just mentioned, the neurotransmitters, the omegas, the vitamin D. And then based off of that test, what me and Valerie do is we evaluate your numbers for a bunch of different levels, and then we can give you a specific amount of what supplement to take.
Yeah.
So it's not just test and then here's what the number is. It's test, here's the number, and then here's a personalized value of what to take and how much.
Yeah, that's really good. And one of the patients recently that had Parkinson's, and they were getting worse and worse and worse. We tested, some of their levels were 1,000 times higher from medications. And that particular person, I said, I can't tell you go off the medication. You're going to have to decide. They brought the results to the doctor and he was shocked. And she said, why aren't you testing? He goes, I don't know. That was his answer. And he said, I do think he should go off, or we should reduce it. Obviously, this is not good. and he was having a lot of problems. So he's not in assisted living at this point, and he is doing better. But again, it's hard when someone already has the condition. That's why it's so important to do those things and be as proactive as you can to slow it down. Okay. All right. Is it true that we don't have enough omegas in our diet and we won't absorb A, D, E, and K? That's a good one. So I'll talk about the absorption, and then you can talk about the omegas, Kent. All of those are fat-soluble vitamins. So essential fatty acids, when you have better, you do absorb fat-soluble vitamins better. That is true. And that's because the body is a symphony, right? Your head is not separate from your foot. Your foot is not separate from your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are not separate from your gut. Yet we treat in medicine everything like it's separate. So when you have enough essential fatty acid, it isn't just about the neural sheaths and the brain matter and the cognitive functioning. It's about every single thing. And when we showed, and even in the conference we had, they talked about phytonutrients, phytonutrients, phytonutrients is part of that foundation. And we do not get enough from food, even when we eat well. So anything else about the omegas in our diet, Ken?
The main thing I could say is, and actually Kathleen has another question here
Okay.
to tag on to that. She's asking if we take the Juice Plus Omega, can you discontinue other omegas?
Mhm.
So to sort of tackle both at once, eating fish exclusively isn't going to get your omega index anywhere near the ideal. It's kind of similar to the vitamin D and the sun. Um, the best thing you can do is to test your blood for it, and then we can give you a specific amount of what to take and how much. Just eating seafood on its own isn't enough, and that's for anybody, no matter what. I think the only thing that goes against that, Valerie, that you mentioned was like you said told me a story of someone from Alaska who ate pounds of fish
Yes.
every day, but then they
Yeah.
just smelled like fish. It's like
Yeah.
nobody wants that. It's the
No, no.
easiest
And they
thing to
didn't eat
do.
that much. Yeah.
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 Easiest thing to do, test your omegas, and then you can get a specific amount of what to take.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Kathleen, what we've seen with the Juice Plus Omega, great at getting the DHA up, which is just half of the omegas. We want the EPA and the DHA up. Juice Plus Omega gets the DHA up just fine, but it doesn't have much EPA. And the EPA is one of those that's especially important for brain function.
Yeah.
So some of the omegas that we use are higher in EPA than in DHA just for that reason. So I would not suggest only doing one or the other. Usually it's a mix of both so that you get both of those levels balanced.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we test. The only exception is if someone has a severe seafood allergy or is a strict vegan. But I will tell you, most of my vegans, even that for religious or animal reasons or whatever, they always bend after they see their levels. It's that important to take what your body needs. The other thing is the Juice Plus Omegas do increase the omega index, but the omega index is one of multiple markers. And as Kent said, there's two main omega-3s, DHA and EPA. The great news with the Juice Plus, it's the best one I've ever seen with the lowest dose, the least amount that increased the DHA. So we love the combination when we can use it because of other benefits, but I totally agree with Ken. How much fruit can you eat a day and have not too much sugar? So it's very individualized. For most people, I'd say 75% of people over 50, I don't recommend more than 2 servings of fruit a day. And a serving is a small apple or a cup of berries or half a cup of any other fruit. However, there are people like my husband who has a higher metabolic type, and also genetically, if you test him, which is very rare, he is an enhanced carbohydrate user. It's probably why he was a good endurance athlete. So he has to eat more carbohydrates or he gets low blood sugar. That is very rare, especially as you get older. So he can have 2, 3, 4 servings of fruit a day, but that's very rare. So my recommendation is no more than two. However, let's say you're not eating bread and you're not eating pasta and you're not eating potatoes and you're not eating oats, then you might be able to have 3 or 4 servings of carbohydrates in fruit. So it's really about what's best for your body, what is your insulin level, and then also what is your weight and how does your body react to those carbohydrates. So that's where it's really hard to give a number, but I try to, if I just say in general, most people no more than 2 servings of fruit a day, period.
Is this mainly prevention, or can much dementia and Alzheimer's be improved or reversed? Most of Basically all of what we're talking about is prevention. There's really no way yet. Maybe there will be one day, but right now there's no way to reverse
Yeah,
some of these neurodegenerative disorders.
yeah, yeah.
So the
All that
best thing you can do is prevent.
yeah. And they show, of course, you can slow it or have some improvements, but that's with people that are pretty progressive. I mean, we're not talking they test once a year. It's a whole different level, even with the clinicians that were there that have patients we talked about. They're not testing their omegas once a week. I mean, once a year. They're testing their omegas every 2, 3 months because they have to change and get so depleted. The other thing that Kathleen asked is no one, in my opinion, should take flax oil. If you want to take flax, then do ground flax meal with lignans. And I never recommend more than 1 to 2 teaspoons a day. We know lignans are good for the fiber and good for anti-cancer. But if you get too much flax and never a flaxseed oil supplement, your omega-6s go up and that increases inflammation. And so it's a major problem. And you cannot get enough omega-3s from it. It would take 12 to 16 cups of flax oil to equal 2 of the right EPA and DHA. And you would be sick. And we have an enzyme called a desaturase enzyme that the body in a human body does not break down omega-6s in large amounts. So I am absolutely no way to flax oil supplements. Ground flax seed, if you want a little bit, or if you've had cancer or for good fiber. But even there, I've never gone over 2 teaspoons with any of my patients because when we do and we test, too much. So yes, should stop flax oil.
What she does is called Orange Theory. It's like a group hit class where you have like a heart rate monitor on your wrist so you can measure all of those things while you're training.
And tell people
There's a,
what HIIT means again, because most people don't
yeah,
know it.
so that's high intensity interval training. So that's what I mentioned earlier, where you're doing all out or 75% or higher intensity for 1 to 3 minutes, and then you're having a short rest, and then you go again. So it's that type of thing.
Yeah.
Group classes are great, like the Orange Theory. I know there's some other ones. Um, but also this is something that you could do outside if you run. You could run for hard for a minute and then you could walk for a minute, something like that. You can also do it with weights like circuit training in a gym.
Yeah. And you could do things at home. I teach people, like I said, when we did it at the conference, we just did squats on our chair. And again, you've got to be careful if you've got degenerative issues, a lot of pain, but even people that walk, they just walk all day. Go a little faster, do a lunge, walk on a beach, walk without shoes. That's harder, right? So there's ways to make it harder so at least you can work your way up to that intensity level. Even if it's for a minute and then you walk for another 5 minutes, it makes a huge difference, they show. Ashley, does running for 20 to 45 minutes 3 times a day count for these types of exercise? No. They count as far as circulation, insulin, but they're not high intensity. So what you want to do with that is, at least one of those workouts, maybe two, run as hard as you can for 1 to 3 minutes, then walk or just run your normal pace, then run hard 1 to 3 minutes. So yeah. Any other comments, Kent? Because
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree with that. They
it's really
they serve
important.
you. I mean, you could do both, right?
Yeah,
They would serve
absolutely.
different purposes.
Yeah.
The longer duration would be great for your cardiovascular health, and
Mhm.
the short bouts of intensity that you could do maybe the next day
Yeah.
would be great for your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And weight training 3 times a week is perfect, Ashley. That's my minimum amount for any age is 3 days a week, 20 to 60 minutes. The biggest mistake I see, and Kent, you can say this because you were a trainer and you worked at Florida State, is that people do not lift heavy enough. I see women do this little thing. I'm like, what the heck is that? You want to lift heavier weights. Now, of course, if you've never weight trained, that's completely different. Okay. Yes, Jill, we can help people with Parkinson's. Absolutely. I've had many cases in the office. Pickleball. I'm not a fan of pickleball. What's the reason? Anybody know?
I know.
You tell me, Kent.
Pickleball, super fun. Also a very high injury risk, especially for people that are above age 50.
Yep. Constant. I cannot tell you how many people have had serious injuries. So just if you're going to do it, have fun, but go light. Okay. Unless you're super fit. And even there, I've seen some pretty bad injuries. And I live in a small town and I've seen it. So not good. Yeah. All right. All right. We're going to close it then. Thank you everybody so much for tuning in. You can go to Nutrition Connection Balance for lots of free education, to order tests, to order the supplements, the liquid D, the capsules, the omegas, and we will get the recording out in an email. If you're not on our email list, you've got to email ncbteam@nutritionconnectionbalance.com, and then we'll get the recording to you. We'll have that. It'll process tonight, but it might take us till tomorrow to get it out. Depends on Kent and I, and sometimes it takes a while to get that done. There's a lot of steps, but we appreciate all of you. And I know you could have spent anywhere you wanted tonight, but spread the word, spread the video, help each other, because we certainly don't want to be taking care of you if we don't have to. We would love to get to help you with the preventative side. All right. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks,
Thank
Ken.
you, everyone.